Okay, my name is Andy Pye. I'm consultant editor at DFA Media Group. We publish a range of online and print-based publications, principally in the manufacturing and automation sector. Before we start, I'd like to point out that Talking Industry is sponsored by the Drives and Controls exhibition, the #1 event for automation, power transmission and motion control, and it will be taking place between the 5th and 6th of June at the well-known venue of the NEC in Birmingham. So it'd be nice to see you there. And in association with Manufacturing and Engineering Week, whose slogan is Drive the Future. You can get some more information at their website, and I've put all that in the chat for you. When I put it in the chat, I had the dates wrong, so my technical specialist, Damien, has corrected that, and it's the 5th and 6th of June and not the 4th to the 6th of June. So once again, hope to see you there. Today, we're going to be talking about efficiency and sustainability in manufacturing and what effect that has on your bottom line. So in other words, is it a pain to be efficient and sustainable, or is it a benefit? And is it something we should be doing anyway and getting those extra benefits of looking after the planet at the same time? To help me through this, I've got two excellent speakers. I've got Gareth Jones, who's from ABB, and he spent more than 30 years working in variable speed drives and automation, and we all know the role that variable speed drives can play in the energy efficiency arena. Prior to joining ABB in 2022, local division manager for drives, he held senior roles at Control Techniques. It's a company that I've followed very well, and I always shudder when the name comes up, because the first time I visited, I booked a ticket to Newport, which I found was an awfully long way from Newtown in Powys. But I got it right subsequently. Gareth now manages ABB's portfolio of drive products in the UK, including low voltage and medium voltage drives. And education-wise, he holds a BEng in electrical and electronic engineering and an MBA. So you're welcome, Gareth, and we look forward to your contribution. Our second speaker is on a slightly different tack, but there's commonality between the two, as I think we'll show. John Dyson is from Winslow Adaptics, and he's also a presenter and active member of IIOM, which is the International Institute of Obsolescence Management. And he's one of the obsolescence solutions teams at Winslow Adaptics. So we'll be exploring the link between obsolescence and sustainability and what implications that has. He has a career in electronics, which began as a PCB designer at Farnell Instruments. And fast forwarding today, his job is to support the transition to the more circular electronics models and to signpost sustainable obsolescence solutions. And part of that, of course, is the crises that we've had in the supply chain for electronics materials and PCBs, which no doubt will form part of the discussion as well. So I thought that a good place to start, we all think we know what sustainability means, and I suppose it means a lot of things, really. So I thought I'd ask the two speakers to start to briefly explain what they understand by the term sustainability. And I'll start with Gareth, and then we'll move over to John. So Gareth, what do you mean? What do you understand by sustainability?
Okay, thanks, Andy. So I think sustainability is such a multifaceted kind of phrase that it can mean lots of things to lots of people in different contexts. You know, I think if we apply it to what we're talking about here, I really see two key areas. The first is around, you know, how do we protect the environment around us? How do we do the right thing, use the right materials, you know, and have the right green credentials that allow people to buy into what we do and allow people to invest in our businesses, those kind of things. And then the second element that I think is really important with sustainability is really about, having a sustainable business model. And what I mean by that really is, being able to operate efficiently, operate your assets efficiently, making sure that you can make profits after your inputs. And I think both of these are equally important, actually. I think having being green, having the right solutions is so important. And a lot of investors now look at the real underlying footprint of businesses and how that impacts and how they're driving to net zero to determine whether that's a sustainable business model. And I think from an energy efficiency point of view, it used to be a nice to have, and I think now it's actually a ticket to play in the marketplace. And if you do it really, really well, it can be a differential advantage for your business.
Thank you. That's really an interesting point, perhaps to start with. Part of it's protecting the planet, which is the environmental protection, and then I suppose what you're saying, it's protecting the company as well. And do they work together, or do they work against each other, or is it a bit of both?
I think they work together in every case, and if we look at the products that ABB sell, ABB positions itself as providing solutions for a low carbon world. Pretty much all the drives, all the motors that we sell, there's an energy efficiency element to that sale, and improving reducing the energy usage, and reducing the losses, improving the sustainability of those businesses.
Thank you. Okay, John, you might want to comment on that and then tell us what your view is on what sustainability means.
I think it's interesting for us because we kind of discovered the fact that we were sustainable by accident. Bit of a story to that, really, that we started out, Winslow Adaptics started out about 48 years ago, making interconnect and dip sockets and this kind of product. We came sort of towards the 90s when the bottom dropped out of that market for UK production. We got approached by the guys at Marconi to make an adapter socket. So they had a problem with unavailability or in fact the obsolescence of a integrated circuit, and came to us and said, can you make an adapter that puts the new shiny one that we can get into the old sockets? And that's what we did. And so we've been doing that since 1990, and we sort of then realized that actually this is what people should be doing. It's not just to get round obsolescence, and I will talk more about obsolescence obviously later, but it's what we should be doing. And if we're looking at high reliability marketplaces, maybe rail, maybe aerospace and defense, these kind of situations, the longevity of the product, the life cycle of the product, maybe lasting 30, or in fact in the UK maybe 50 years, is paramount importance. And actually applying these kind of techniques is the most sustainable thing you can do. To keep something running for a longer period of time this is our argument, is the best way of achieving some form of true sustainability. It's obviously something that we can all do a little bit towards, and we do our little bit towards as well, in terms of trying to bring the company operation towards sort of like a lower carbon consumption. But it's really important, actually, the output. I think it's the kind of the quantity of energy that perhaps gets consumed by the products that we all make that actually perhaps is the one we need to try and slim down.
Thank you. I mean, you raised an interesting point there that perhaps it was said to me, I think, in one of these Talking Industry presentations quite a while ago, that people in the UK take a pride in keeping things running forever. I'm guilty, because I kept a Ford Anglia running for 35 years, and then Brilliant. I ran out of spares, so I had to do something about that. But I did keep the registration plate. And that may not be the best way to save energy, because it's a pretty inefficient vehicle in comparison to things that have rolled off the production line since. So whereas I think some other countries tend to invest more in new equipment and get the benefits. So if you, for example, look at the population of robots in the UK, we're pretty low in comparison to other G7 countries, other industrialized countries. Certainly in terms of robot population per, I don't know, 10,000 employees, I think is the figure. And we sort of sit down there somewhere between Malta and Thailand, which is quite depressing. But is it because we have that kind of culture of wanting to keep things running that we're not very good at managing sustainability?
I think there's a difference between keeping things running for longer than they should. And I take on board your point about cars. You know, I had a classic Mini myself for some years, and yeah, there's a whole sort of industry that's built up around keeping those lovely vehicles going for longer. But it would never be my daily drive. So it's, yeah, there are two different things, and I think if you look at, I talked about the railway network, and you know they will typically have a longevity of 30 years. So that's the specification, very often a maintenance contract and everything around the 30-year mark. But in between, at 15 years, they'll have a technology refresh. So at that point, they will undertake maybe some new customer screens, maybe some new technology into USB sockets and things like that, Wi-Fi and so on. So there is a possibility to do that. And perhaps that's where we should be aiming, taking sort of a view from those kind of markets. These guys have been doing this for a long period of time and are getting actually really quite good at it. And the other point, just leading on to obsolescence, because we talked about obsolescence, is that it's, sorry, I've lost the thread of my argument there. Sorry.
Okay. Well, while you get that back, I mean, you're, Gareth, obviously an extensive user of the sort of electronics PCBs that John is involved in. What's your view about updating equipment and the role of new equipment against keeping older equipment running?
So I think it really depends a lot on, you know, what we're talking about. So one of the areas I think where ABB excels is in managing the life cycle of products. You know, so we launch, you know, if we take ACS 600 products as an example, you know, we've got a huge install base of ACS 600 products that are still running today. We've kind of supported them through maintenance upgrades throughout their life. We've changed capacitors, you know, we've kept them running. But eventually, when they do come to the end of their life, you know, it becomes very difficult to keep them running economically at a certain point, and then it's the right time to upgrade. I think what John's talking about, you know, is some technologies that allow us to get to that point. I think for motors, it's slightly different. You know, I think if you look at an AC motor, if you just take, I know, as an example, 110 kilowatt, 1500 RPM standard AC motor, typically the energy required to build that motor represents something like 0.05% of its total energy usage throughout its life. So pretty much 99.95% of the energy that motor consumes is going to be through the electricity that comes in through the terminals. And by upgrading from IE3, you know, which typically could be 92.5% efficient, up to an IE5 motor, which would be 94.2% efficient, so 1.7% improvement in energy efficiency, you can see that there's, you know, a huge saving there in CO2 emissions that's going to really make a big impact over the life of that motor. And, you know, I used to have the same thoughts as, you know, you were saying, really about keeping that car going effectively, because the embedded carbon in that car means that actually that offsets the extra fuel it uses, but it really doesn't with an electric motor. You know, you're much better to get that electric motor out, install a new motor, and immediately you'll start reducing the carbon footprint of your operation.
Yes. So there's both a financial payback in installing new equipment, but you've got to look at the energy payback on a sustainable basis as well. So yeah, so that's given us a good kind of introduction to some of the topics we'll be talking about. I will ask John in a moment to give us a presentation about his specific activities and go into more detail about some of the things we've already discussed. Before I do that, something I should have mentioned right at the beginning is we want questions from our audience. And so the way to do that is, because you're in listen only mode, is to use the chat function. There is a Q&A function as well, but it tends to be a lot more convenient if everything goes into the chat. And our speakers as well will put information and links to information in the chat as well. So by the time we get to the end of this, it will be quite a good reference document for everyone to take away with them and study the subject in more detail. If you want to ask a question, the ideal way is to start with a Q colon. That means I know it's a question, but you might want to make a comment anyway. We already have a question already in the chat, so I'll come on to that in a moment. And if you want to maybe give your question in person, which we can do, put a V colon instead of a Q colon, and I'll know that you're willing to be seen and heard, as well as to put your question in the chat for us to answer. We'll take questions at all kinds of points. We're very unscripted, so there's no overall plan, but we will have a wash-up session at the end to cope with any questions that we haven't had time to cover during the presentations. So please use the chat. Ask us anything you want. You've got two excellent speakers here, so have a discussion with them. And with that, I will now ask John to explain a bit more about his role, his activities, and the relevance of sustainability to those. John.
Yeah, sure. The thing I was going to say was about obsolescence, really. That there is, most people don't realise that there is a whole sort of sector of management that is actually maintaining these products that I talked about over a longer period of time. So there's actually an IEC standard 62402 2019, which actually gives you a list of or at least signposts good practice. It doesn't give you all the answers, but it signposts good practice. And the organization that I'm sort of representing, if you like, today, which is the International Institute of Obsolescence Management, or the IOM, which is a sort of a nearly worldwide organization. We're looking for new chapters. We're in Europe, we're in the UK, we're in the US. We're just opening up in Australia as well, and in France and Germany in Europe. So these guys are spending their days actually not just reacting to an obsolescence problem, which is traditionally how you found out that there was a problem. Something is now end of life. What do we do? Really, what the science suggests is that actually we should be, from the moment that we design a product, we should be thinking, is this recommended for new designs? Is this something that is likely to become a problem for us over the life cycle of this product, whatever that product would be? And it's important to draw a difference between the proactive and the reactive, and it's the proactive that we're trying to promote people and trying to encourage people. It should not be a surprise that if you're trying to maintain something for a 15-year period, that something will go obsolete, particularly with electronics going at the pace that does. I subscribe to the kind of world that I live in and that IOM lives in, is promoting the longevity of products fundamentally, or giving engineers the tools to keep products maintained and spares available for a long period of time. I think you're muted, Andy.
Yeah, there we go. There's a warning. With the complexity of electronic circuits, that must introduce a lot of complications to that, doesn't it? Because, you know, it's not, well, maybe it is, but it's not that easy just to make little tweaks to an electronic circuit, perhaps in the way that you can to a sort of heavy
No, it's not.
mechanical construction.
It's not, but it's something where, you know, again, there's a team of people, you know, and we are some of those people that do this as a day job. And when you've done something as a day job for 30 years, you've pretty much got the idea how it works. You know, it might be things like changing voltages for new processors. For instance, it might be slowing down signals. There's various things that you can do within electronics. And of course, the great rule of electronics generally is it gets smaller, which is brilliant for the kind of adapter and interposer function that we very often use, where the new component is smaller than the old one, so you have some spare real estate to do those changes, to slow things down, to change the voltage, and so on. So yeah, there's always a way around it, but just look for the experience. The people.
So I mean, Gareth, you will be a specifier of PCBs, won't you? So what does ABB do in terms of thinking in terms of the longevity specifically of printed circuit boards and related devices to go into drives, and how easy they are to modify further on?
So, Andy, you know, this isn't an area that I'm directly involved with in ABB, but you know, I can talk quite generally about this. That choosing the right components that have the right longevity is absolutely critical. And there'll be a team within ABB looking at this, you know, managing this throughout the product's life cycle, and looking at engineering alternative products into the existing products as and when required to manage this, and to make the last time buys required to see the product through its life cycle. So yeah, it's definitely a you know, something that comes pretty high up on the agenda of any drives manufacturer.
Now you're a big company, so you will have a team that can look into this. But is it more of a challenge in, you know, small and medium-sized enterprises where they don't really have the time or resources to look into it? Gareth, I'll ask both of you, but Gareth first.
Yeah, I imagine it probably is, and I imagine, but you know, I've worked alongside other companies, for example, that make elevator controllers in the past to us, these small companies, and it's always a concern, you know, and everybody has to choose their components very carefully to achieve that longevity that they expect and need. But from time to time, you know, they have to re-engineer.
Yeah, we'll come back to your program for working with other companies later on, I'm sure, which I guess can help small and medium-sized enterprises to benefit from your expertise and share information between one another. So we'll come back to that bit. John, what's your experience of the difference between the large company and the others?
Yeah, well, I'm a small company person myself. Most of my history, recent years, has been in the SME sector. So I'll kind of comment from that side. I think it's more difficult to have a dedicated person in an SME. I think that's fairly obvious, but you know, in the larger corporate, if you like, there's probably a department that will manage the obsolescence function rather than just a person. And I think when you get down to the small side of SME, it's difficult to even have a person. It's very difficult to even have necessarily training. And I think this is where something like the Institute of Obsolescence Management is able to help some of the smaller people with sort of training and assistance. Having said that, you know, I've seen the other side of it. I've seen corporates who still don't want to join into the organization. They maybe don't want to share quite so much. That's a possibility. So that does happen. I've seen both sides.
So tell me a little bit about how the Institute would help smaller organizations to share expertise and to come up with common needs.
Okay, well, it's what's built around the Institute. It has been a group of solution providers. So on the one hand, the first thing that may help is is actually simply exchanging, having meetings and exchanging information and best practice with other people, i.e. networking. The second thing then is that there are organizations that offer training I mentioned the IEC standard. There are organizations that offer training and certification that gets you into a sort of associate membership or membership of the institute. There then are also a layer of solution providers like ourselves at Winslow Adaptics who target a specific problem that people have, whether it's a corporate or whether it's an SME. And we offer services to help that, or to mitigate that particular aspect of the obsolescence problem. So that's what the Institute of Obsolescence Management will do to help at both levels.
And how does one go about joining that institute as a member?
Okay, well, the best thing to do is to go find us on LinkedIn. Perhaps there's quite a lot going on LinkedIn. We in fact have a webinar coming up on this topic of PFAS, which is something which is sort of bringing unexpected obsolescence. It's something that affects everybody actually, and they don't yet know that it will. But I know that we're going to be talking about some of the major chemical producers who are actually stopping something like 10,000+ products from their product range because of well, predominantly European and American legislation. So best thing to do is to find us on LinkedIn. I'm hoping we can put somebody can get a link up actually at some point to drive people to it, which might be tricky for me where I am today.
I'll do that for you. Yeah, I'll do that when you're busy chatting. Now, can you just tell us a little bit more about PFAS? Is this fluoropolymer?
Yeah, so
territory, isn't it?
I've got to say, first of all, I'm by no means a subject expert. But what I do know is that these chemicals have found their way typically into things like flame retardants and lubricants and things which sort of bendy and flexible, and fire retardant, which you think about it affects so many pieces of equipment in the electronics industry, even though it's not necessarily, you'd think it was a kind of a mechanical type problem rather than an electronic one. But it affects absolutely everything from lubricants that are used to extract integrated circuits from molds and so on and so forth. So there's lots of aspects that we just have no idea how it will affect us, I think. So it's important for everybody, whether they are in the chemical industry or whether they're in electronics or mechanical, to perhaps join us on that webinar.
Yeah, I mean, the only side of it I know anything about really is the fluoropolymer side, for PTFE.
Yeah,
and there's a range of other related fluoropolymers that are mainly sort of non-stick and corrosion resistant. And whether I guess this would cover them as well, because I mean they have great uses as well as perhaps some recently acknowledged hazards.
I mean, the problem is that there will be, I'm sure, replacements for those products. It will take time because of the sheer volume of them. But it's going to ripple through, because what happens is that you go back in the obsolescence world, you go back to the original spec sheet, the drawing, and the drawing will call up that particular product, and to change that drawing is maybe will involve requalification, like a whole sort of raft of extra work that you wouldn't necessarily expect.
So I mean, it's very difficult because you can't necessarily find a universal replacement for some. I mean, asbestos is a very good example, actually, and actually is something I did work on perhaps more than 30 years ago. But you have to look at each application individually and work out what the best solution is for that one, because asbestos was used in insulation, brakes, polymers, all kinds of different applications. And there's no one universal replacement. And if there is a universal replacement, it often had the same physical characteristics of the one you're trying to replace. So potentially it could cause some of the same problems. So, it was a big industry and a big project in itself. And I think, fluoropolymers would be kind of similar, really, because there's a lot of different application areas. So that's definitely one to watch. And while we've been talking about that, my colleague Damien, who's on technicals, has put in a link to the IIOM, so that's now there for everyone to see.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, well, before we come on to Gareth, who's been sitting there very patiently, there's a question in the chat, which I'm struggling. There we go. It's from Michael Nicholson, who is from another association, actually, the IEEP, and I hope that I can persuade him to pop on and chat to you guys later on. And he's talking about the supply of critical raw materials, which is another aspect of sustainability. I mean, we know that that in batteries for electric cars, for example, we got all kinds of issues with lithium and with rare earth materials, and not just about the amount that's available, but where they are actually being extracted as well, which is quite a geopolitical sensitive issue in itself. So the question Michael's asking is whether there is a growing concern about the supply of critical raw materials, and does that affect calculations over what is sustainable? I mean, I suppose if something's going to run out, it's not going to be sustainable, and whether or not you keep machines and widgets running versus introducing new machines that are dependent or more dependent on critical raw materials. Gareth, do you have an issue on that? Is that something that you have?
I've got a few thoughts on it. You know, my thoughts are that somebody buys a new machine because they need to be competitive in their marketplace. You know, whatever they're doing, they're making an investment to either be to make the products faster, to make the products better, to make the products more reliable, to add value to the products that they're selling. And I think that if you don't invest in those new machinery, then again, you know, this idea of sustainability as survival comes into play for the business. So I think the idea of not investing in new machines, you know, isn't a viable option for most businesses. They've got to invest in new machines. They've got to keep innovating, and they've got to keep with the market. I think what's critical is the circularity around that, you know, and how you reuse those materials. You know, it does. If I take an example, you know, the raw materials in an IE3 motor are pretty similar to the raw materials in an IE5 motor, you know, with SynRM. They're just configured in a different way. There's technology in there which makes that motor more efficient. So you're not necessarily, you know, creating a big problem with raw materials. I don't believe. You know, you can reuse those motors and recycle them. And that's what all of our partners do, actually. You know, they take those motors and they get them into that recycling cycle. So I think circularity is key, really, rather than not investing.
One part of that, I suppose, is modularity, isn't it, of design? Because in your range of drives, you know, there's a lot of commonality between the different products, so that I mean, potentially you could strip one that's cannibalize it, I suppose, would be the term that London buses might use, that you could take a housing from one and just put it into another, and even if the motor was wrecked or vice versa, couldn't you?
Yeah, I think that, you know, what everybody needs from their equipment is generally reliability. So there is a trade-off at some point. You know, the equipment doesn't last forever. The equipment does need to be replaced if you want to maintain a certain level of reliability. But it's doing that at the right point and extending that life as long as possible, I think, is what's critical. And we can help you do that. You know, we've got a program for every product. There's a program for how that product can be maintained and updated at the right points.
John, your views on critical raw materials. I mean, what are the critical raw materials from your perspective that you need to keep an eye on?
Yeah, I think electronics has a lot to do in terms of circularity. I think the question kind of, it probably supports my arguments a little bit. I think you know, our belief is in keeping products going for as long as possible and supporting that circularity, you know, that Gareth was talking about. So, I think it's important that that we find ways of using things as much as we can on a second life basis, and that goes for everything. I think, you know, I'm not sure personally how much difference it makes. I'm thinking things like trains and so on and so forth versus iPhones. You know, what actually consumes the most raw materials? I suspect probably the consumer products, but I'm not sure. But I think, you know, we need to find ways of making sure that if possible, things can be reused in some other purpose. If not possible, then should be appropriately recycled, perhaps a little better or a lot better than we've been able to achieve so far, certainly speaking from the UK standpoint.
I mean, the more complex a product becomes, the harder it is to recycle, isn't it? I mean, it's you know,
definitely, but I also think that the manufacturers need to take some responsibility for that, because I think they have to be the best people to be supporting that teardown process, if you like, because they're the ones that built it in the first place, and you're looking for, I don't know, repairability factors and and just building in kind of just having the thought to do that in the first place at design time or you know, manufacturing time, rather than leaving it till the end and scratching your head and thinking, now what do I do with this?
Yeah, I think that is so important, that with all projects, getting the design right and getting a multidisciplinary team in on the ground floor, thinking about all the aspects down the line, manufacture, recycling, sustainability, etc.
Yeah,
is key, isn't it? Because if you address it as a bolt-on, then you're not going to get the full benefits, or perhaps no benefit at all, or from what could be achieved.
yeah, I think so. And I think, you know, with modularity, you mentioned modularity a while ago. That offers a great opportunity, I think, to maybe balance the requirements of keeping a sustainable platform, but also building in tech improvements. You know, because if you can sort of just change the processor without having to change everything else on your smartphone or something, you know, maybe that kind of approach is ultimately the way we can balance the needs of tech improvements, which I think we need, and the sustainability side of it, which is so important for the future.
Richard Bradshaw is asking an interesting question, which is a nice heavy industry question. So I'm going to ask John first. Do you think there are certain industries or machinery where retrofit is a key aspect for efficiency and sustainability?
Absolutely. So, you know, most of the time we're not installing a whole new machine. We're installing a new drive in an existing machine, and we're improving the efficiency of that whole process through doing that, and looking at how we control that motor, how we control that machine, and all of those things can have dramatic impact on the, you know, the overall efficiency footprint of the equipment.
So replacing a component rather than the whole thing, or adding functionality to a machine, I suppose.
So Andy, what it's probably worth talking about a little bit is if I just share my screen a second.
Yeah.
So it's that screen there. Can you see that?
I can, yeah, nearly. There we go.
It's there now.
Okay, so you know, this is
thanks for the plug.
Well, this is Drive Controls magazine from 2011, February 2011, and you can see on here that what this is promoting is our energy appraisals. Okay, so this is a service that we can offer. It's available, you know, throughout the country. We've got trained engineers, you know, in every part of UK and in Ireland. And these guys can come along and they can look at the applications that the factory has, identify the best opportunities. And I've used this from 2011 because it shows, you know, this isn't something that we've just started doing last week or since the energy crisis. This is something that we've been doing for a long time. You know, we've got really good processes around this, how we go about it, the reports that we give to the customers to identify the best opportunities. So what these people will do is they'll go to the site, they'll understand the processes that are involved in the site, they'll look for the most likely opportunities for energy saving. So we start with the the low-hanging fruit. We'll then recommend some solutions. We'll provide what payback that's going to give the customer, and then make an offer to the customer to solve that. And this is something that, it says here thousands of tons of CO2 reduced. It's going to be tens or hundreds of thousands of CO2 now, because it's something that we've been doing continuously. So I think this is really important. But what I'd just like to mention, Andy, while I'm at it, is ABB's also started an organization called the Energy Efficiency Movement. So the Energy Efficiency Movement is it started off as an ABB organization, but it's actually moving away from being directly ABB and being more independent. And it's really an organization that looks to share best practice across industry for how we can decarbonize. I just want to share one other thing while I've got this up on my screen. So this is a couple of scenarios. This is from the International Energy Agency. A couple of scenarios of where we're going from a CO2 point of view. So you can see here, the current trajectory is increasing CO2. If we go through the policies that governments have put in place already, that kind of flattens that line a little bit. But in order to really get a sustainable development scenario, we've got to do a lot more. And that's going to get driven by carbon trading, carbon credits, and that kind of thing. But the biggest opportunity, you look down here, this isn't ABB's data. This is from an independent organization. The biggest opportunity is actually doing what we do today, but doing far more efficiently. 30% of the savings that we need to make are going to come from doing things better than we do them already. So I think this is really the big opportunity. And if you look at most industrial processes, most electricity is used in driving electric motors. So if we link that to, this is electric motor, typical process, so this is what I was talking about earlier, where 0.05% of the CO2 is emitted during the manufacture of that motor and the end of its life, and pretty much 100% of the CO2 is emitted through the electricity that goes through it. So if you could save, 2% energy for that motor for its running life, that has a huge impact. It actually gets much better than that, because if you slow down this machine, you get additional energy savings, and actually the efficiency improvements compared to a standard i3 motor also improved dramatically. So this is the direction we've got to take to really help decarbonize industry.
So many questions. Carry on. Sorry. No, I mean that's brilliant. I mean, it raises three things, doesn't it? Really. I mean, first of all, in your curve, what do we need to do to hit the net zero targets of the nation? I mean, whereabouts would that be on the? You've shown the red line where current policy, but we need to do a lot better than that, don't we, in order to meet even national targets on net zero, never mind international ones. Do you know how far down that slope's got to go in order to get there? Or
well, I don't, but and I think the targets are changing somewhat as we progress. But I think every industry's got a role to play. Even oil and gas as an example. We're going to require oil and gas for a good while yet. And so, actually producing oil and gas in a more energy efficient way still makes a lot of sense. So we're looking at things like, can we take gas turbine engines and convert them to electricity so they can use renewable energy from wind, for example? Those kind of things we can help with and allow companies to decarbonize their operations in those kind of ways as well.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not just industry, is it? I mean, industry is just part of the equation. Buildings, I think, are massive energy waster, aren't they? So
yeah, and
we can do our bit, but we can't solve the whole puzzle.
Yeah, and I mentioned energy efficiency movement. There's a link in the text there to go to that. This really is, you know, an open forum. So, John, you know, it'd be great to have Winslow Adaptics on there, you know, pushing the sustainability from the angles that you're discussing today, you know, which is probably not so well represented at the moment, but this is really an opportunity for any company that wants to share best practice or learn from the innovators around to actually go in there and see what's available, because you know, helps companies identify the best opportunities, and it's open to you know, literally everybody. We've got competitors in there as well.
I think this is exactly the right way to go. I mean, it can't be effective if it's a proprietary activity. You do need everybody to participate, because, you know, it's well, we're all rowing down the same river, aren't we? And you know, it's not about the design of each individual boat. It's about which way the stream is taking us, and very important that we do that. So how many members have you got at the moment? What's the sort of rate of growth?
It's well, the growth is exponential.
Great.
To be honest, I don't know the number of members today, but let me find out and I'll drop it on the chat.
Yeah, I think it'd be very interesting, you know, because it would be interesting. I suppose there's an awareness issue. You need balances of large companies, small companies, different sectors, and so on.
And in there, we've got Microsoft, we've got Amazon, for example.
Yeah.
You know, down to system integrators, UK-based system integrators. You know, anybody really who's got a voice, or, you know, something to add to the conversation is in there.
And how do you get? Is there a corporate membership? Do you pay for it, or is it?
It's free membership. You make a commitment to reduce energy, and that gives you access to it. You know, and I think the format will evolve over time. But already there's some great resources in there, you know, that people can refer to. And there will be events coming up from the energy efficiency movement, you know, that bring together interested parties.
And can you join as an individual, or is it corporates, or is it both? Or
generally it's businesses. I don't think there's individual memberships. There's business membership, but, you know, there's no limit on size of business, or you know, or what the business does. It's about, you know, your commitment to decarbonize and to
that sounds really good. Yeah, well, hopefully everyone will take that up, and we'll grow the membership a little bit. And coming back to Drives and Controls 2011,
yeah,
how is that developed? I mean, in terms of, you know, the amount of use that it's been, because that's a proprietary service rather than the energy efficiency movement. And how is that built, and how is that growing in terms of numbers of customers and so on?
So it started off as a service from ABB. You know, that you come to ABB and you'd get this service. The way we go to market in the UK is through our value provider network. So that's around 13 companies around the UK who are able to do service work and work with ABB. They're all fully trained to be able to offer that service. So, you know, we've literally got hundreds of engineers available to go and support this in the marketplace. I've also just got a note on the number of members. So it's 488 members in 43 countries and 23 industries as part of the energy movement.
Excellent. And if we come back in 5 years' time, we'll find that massively increased, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Can I just drop in and ask Gareth a question?
Please,
then? Is because, you know, we'd be keen to join, obviously. And is there any kind of requirement, or is there any cost involved in you know, if you were looking at it from an SME perspective, is there any requirement other than just the fact that you say, yeah, this is what we're going to do?
It's a real commitment to reduce energy, and that's all that's required. There's no costs.
Perfect. Great, thank you.
I suppose the only, you know, I know there are other large organisations, both within your sector, Gareth, and elsewhere, that are also keen to promote the energy saving. I mean, how would you? I mean, if they were to run a similar scheme, how would you work together I mean, that's probably quite a challenge, isn't it?
I don't know. I think, you know, the ambition is to drive energy efficiency at the end of the day, and so, you know, I think um there need to be some discussions, wouldn't there, about how we do it, but you know, never say never.
Yeah, I mean, I've long thought that industrial companies with the right mindset are likely to be more likely to solve our planetary difficulties than most of the politicians that we elect or don't elect around the world, who seem to have short-term ambitions or no ambitions at all. You know, and there are so many altruistic companies around, you know, in all these fields, whether it be, you know, energy efficiency or food manufacture, and you know, there's so many that are doing the right things. And whilst industry itself seems to have a bad name, doesn't it? I mean, how do we give ourselves the right name?
Um, I think we are. You know, I think we talk about industry, and you know, we imagine these dark factories, but you know, industry includes the solar industry, includes the wind industry, includes, you know, nuclear industry, I guess. I think we've just got to talk a lot more, haven't we, about what we do, you know, and how we are producing these solutions. You know, whether it's electrification of transportation, for example, for marine applications, you know, which we're getting more and more involved in. Whether it's hydrogen power generation, you know, from renewables or whatever, you know, we've just got to talk about it a lot more and communicate better, I think.
Yeah, I mean, very often it's the oil and gas companies that come in for a real shellacking, don't they, in this area very often? But is
Yeah,
it
but
deserved, or should we be more tolerant?
well, I think we all, you know, we all need fuel to put in our vehicles, don't we? I think the industry is focused on reducing energy costs. There's also government support to help them do that. So, you know, I think they are pulling the weight actually,
Yeah,
and investing heavily in that space.
I agree. Yeah, we've had a question actually, which relates to the energy efficiency movement, and I guess John might be interested in this if he wants to become a member. What do you define as a real commitment to saving energy?
Okay, well, we're not going to manage, you know, we're not going to police people's commitments. Okay, but there's a requirement to state what your goals are around sustainability and energy efficiency to join, and that's published on the as part of your membership on the energy efficiency movement. But yeah, there's no policing of that. You know, it wouldn't be the right place for that to happen, I don't think.
I think there are, if I can just sort of jump in, there are various sectors where this is sort of happening. Actually, I look to an organization called JOSCAR, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's the body run by Helios that look after, if you like, a list of accreditations that people have within the aerospace and defense and security industries. So if you've got AS9100D, these kind of aerospace equivalence to quality standards and so on, they're listed in here. So that the idea is that the big companies who are procuring from SMEs like ourselves can look down this list and say, yeah, okay, they've tick, they've ticked all the boxes, we can do business with these guys. And that's really important. Now they're actually now expanding that to sort of to initially to assist you in terms of your ESG commitments and your sustainability criteria, which is this is actually now coming through in this sort of accreditation body. So I think you're seeing pressures from shareholders, from owners, but I also think, you know, Andy, you mentioned about people actually wanting to do the right thing, and I think there really is an awful lot, a groundswell of opinion where people are wanting to go to work for more than just money. You know, I mean, we need, you know, there's no getting away from it. You need it. I need, you know, I need money to live on and to do things. But actually, you want to go home thinking that you've kind of done something. I think that's really, really important for people. And I think there's a, as I say, there's a groundswell of people, probably maybe younger people, perhaps coming up who are thinking in that way. And I applaud it. You know, I feel the same way. I mean, I'm
I
excited
agree.
for the
I
future,
think
but it will.
there's certainly, yeah, there's been surveys that have shown that young people will use that as quite a big factor as to where they would like to be employed, you know, and they will make assessments on who, you know, it's hard enough to get a job, but assuming you do have a choice, you know, they will choose the one with better sustainability and green credentials, I think. And that's as it should be. It's certainly the young people who are most vociferous about needing to protect the planet, quite understandably.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have more skin in the game, don't they? Yeah. So okay, let's move on to some related issues, sort of more specifically manufacturing. We've talked about obsolescence, but there's a kind of related field which is about supply chains in electronics, and this has been quite a crisis, hasn't it, in terms of being able to get PCBs at all because of geopolitical activities. Things seem to have improved a little bit, but I get the feeling that we might be going into another crisis fairly soon. What's your kind of view about the supply chain and its role in obsolescence management, John?
Well, it's interesting what happened. If I could just touch a minute on what happened through sort of the post-COVID era. Obviously, we all know that the industry shut down, and in particular, I think the automotive industry is cited, and others were involved as well. But they kind of cancelled all their contracts with the semiconductor manufacturers because they can't build cars because they weren't allowed to. But this whole just-in-time system then came to a collapse when they suddenly wanted to build cars again, when they were allowed and when there was, you know, demand, but because they couldn't get the semiconductors that they need, and vehicles now can have 1,000 semiconductors on them. It's a different thing from the old Ford Anglia. So what we found then was this what we call diminished supply. So rather than pure obsolescence, it was, if you like, a temporary obsolescence. So for 12 months, we can't get any chips. So what we're going to do, we've got 100,000 things to build. So, but we can get 100,000 sort of something similar. And that was, you know, it was good business for us, to be perfectly honest with you. It was a good period. We're able to keep people operating, people running in sectors that we hadn't worked in before. But I think my concern is, I know you alluded to the possibility of further issues, and you know we had sadly a earthquake in Taiwan. You know, these are the kind of things. We have the problem in the Red Sea with the shipments, and leaving aside everything else, all these things that would disrupt this supply chain, which is really quite thin. Can really cause huge problems. And I think people need to be thinking in terms of second sourcing. You know, what happens if we can't get this? Is there a plan B? And normally people say, well, no, it's electronics. We can't get another one. That's the only one that make it. Well, is that true? Is there no way to actually build modularity into your design to kind of give yourself that flexibility? If you as a designer think about that, is that possible? Well, perhaps it is.
Yeah. Gareth, that must have been a factor that had impinged on your production capabilities in that COVID and post-code era.
Absolutely, and it impacted on everybody. You know, as there wasn't a manufacturer that got away, you know, scot-free really from this. And I think, you know, exactly as John says, you know, all we can do is look at dual sourcing, you know, making sure that we're not reliant on any one component, and also looking at, you know, multiple locations of manufacture, which is what we do.
Yeah. What about the sort of implications for reshoring or nearshoring so that we're not so dependent on distant manufacturers with long transportation?
Well, we're seeing a lot of our customers doing that. I think, we've got a global model already. So we manufacture in Finland, for example. We manufacture in Switzerland. So, I think we've already got this, regional manufacturing model that helps us a lot from that point of view.
The sources of PCBs would still be, would it be a vulnerability, would you say, or not?
Well, the PCBs not so much. Well, it's the components on the PCBs rather than the PCBs themselves. But yeah, you've got to be able to multi-source and find the right paths to purchase. But it's so unprecedented. I think what we saw following COVID, that any level of multi-sourcing, wouldn't have withstood that.
And that was a black swan event, really.
Yeah, and we're at the moment we've got full availability, very fast availability. I think most other manufacturers probably do as well, but we're very good at the moment.
Bigger companies have an advantage, would you say? I've worked with a supplier of safety switches recently, and they said that they were not a priority when the automotive industry wanted to swallow up everything that was available, and it meant that their lead times got badly stretched.
Yeah. It's going to have some impact, isn't it? Purchasing power.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, we've given that one an airing. I'd like to, the other aspect I think I'd like to cover is condition monitoring. In other words, being able to predict reliably when equipment is going to fail, remote access to that equipment, the involvement of being able to collect and analyze data, so that things don't come as an awful surprise when equipment fails, but you're in that position to do the type of retrofitting that Richard was asking about a little while ago. It's a good way of extending legacy equipment because you can add components to machines to provide to sensors, basically to measure key parameters and then make sure that they can be monitored from anywhere. So is that something that's building, Gareth, in terms of your own products and also the customers on whose machines your products are installed?
Absolutely. So, it's a really important area, and I think it does link as well to the sustainability and efficiency, because you make sure that what you are doing is running as efficiently as it can be. So you find problems earlier. So ABB offer a range of solutions for this, for the whole drive chain, where we can monitor vibration levels, we can monitor temperature levels, and access that remotely, and then we can layer on services on top of that if required to, give intelligence based on the feedback that's coming from these sensors. And the sensors themselves, are relatively cheap devices, to purchase. They can go on any motor. It doesn't just have to be an ABB motor. It can be any gearbox, any motor, any parts of the complete drive chain that you want to monitor that these can sit on.
Do you find that, you can also add energy meters, of course, to measure what the energy consumption of particular pieces of machinery likes to be, which is a pretty simple thing to do with a serial interface or something. So it's quite straightforward.
But actually, the sensors can do that. It's a sensor which it's got no electrical connection to the motor, so there's no concern around security. Although these we're very, very focused around cybersecurity, but there's no concern around security because it's not actually interfacing to any of the control elements. And this smart sensor sits on the motor. It can from the vibration, from the flux levels, it can determine what the energy usage is and feed that back. So, and as I said earlier, it doesn't just work on ABB motors, it works on any motor. So it's something that you can retrofit very, very easily to get that footprint.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's a very positive area. Do you think there are different levels of take up in different market sectors? Is that something you've seen, or?
Yeah, and it tends to be more critical. So I think what we're seeing is, it started off with the very critical applications, and as the costs have reduced and the acceptance of the technology's grown, then we're seeing it coming down. So we're seeing it, for example, in water pumping stations, remote water pumping stations, where there's obviously a big advantage to being able to monitor that equipment. As one example, cement factories, that kind of thing.
You touched on cybersecurity there, and obviously taking a lot of data off these machines, stored in the cloud, one presumes. Are your customers still nervous about using the cloud to store data, or is that something that's
I think
they're happier about now?
I think most companies are using software as a service for generally for some pretty critical finance applications, for example. And so the acceptance of software as a service and the security around that, I think, is growing. And it's really, meeting the latest cybersecurity standards is critical, to give that reassurance and that confidence to customers.
Yeah. Is that something you have come across at all, John? The condition monitoring side. I mean, with your
not really. It's outside my sphere. I mean, otherwise, other than saying it's a great idea. It's surely it's got to be a smart way of getting the maintenance done and keeping an eye on things are spinning in the way they should be spinning and so on. I don't.
Yeah.
Forgive me. I don't know any more technicalities.
No,
but
and
yeah,
therefore
definitely
it would have a role in terms of extending the life of a piece of equipment,
absolutely.
and also the viability of the company that was using it. Which is back to your point right at the beginning about the two strands of sustainability. We need the planet and the company to survive. So condition monitoring is a big enabler, I think, of that. So as we come towards the end, I'm going to ask the two of you to think about where you think there will be changes, improvements, and differences in 5 years' time, but you can choose 10 if you feel more comfortable with that. Where will we be compared to where we are now? While you're having a couple of seconds to think about that, I'm just going to see if Michael Nicholson is still on the call, and if he'd like to join us for a quick chat about the IEEP, he'd be most welcome to do so. So if he can just let me know by typing yes into the chat, we'll finish with that. But while I'm asking him, Gareth, what do you think? Where do you think we're going to be in 5 and 10 years' time compared to where we are now?
I think we're on a path. We've got the technology already that we need to decarbonize. I think we're going to see carbon trading, impacting more and more businesses, and that's the plan. Really, is that pushes down from, at the moment, very, very high energy users down to lower energy users. So that's going to have an impact. It's going to drive continued energy efficiency. We're going to see legislation coming in that drives up energy efficiency of any new equipment. And we're going to see the companies that take on board energy efficiency as a way of life surviving and actually thriving, and those that don't, are going to struggle, to be honest. And I think that's the path that we're on.
Yeah, so it's a fork in the road in essence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, John, just quickly, your point of view on that.
Yeah, my closing thoughts on that really is that we have to be careful with the green shoots, because I think it's easy to change the groundswell of opinion by I don't know, adjusting what's going on in the media, adjusting what the government are promoting and sponsoring and so on. So I think we've got to be very careful to support the movement rather than force it to fizzle away, which there is that possibility. I think that's important.
What do you see as the factors which might cause it to fail?
Well, I look, you see, I'm not saying failure as such, but I look to the electric vehicle movement, and I think there's been a hiccup along the road, and I feel that the message coming through from government has been sort of has basically poured water on it, for want of a better expression, a little bit. I think it's made people's concerns about infrastructure and some of these other things brought it to the forefront by adjusting the sort of the financial incentives, and I think perhaps that was too early. So I just mean to say you have to be careful with the basics on a government level, I think, for making sure this continues.
So make sure that industry is able to influence government and educate government, and to lobby government is important.
This will be another. I'm going to run out of battery, I think, but this will be another whole different webinar, I think.
Yes, indeed. Okay, thank you for that. Right, well, Michael's on the call, so I'd just like to invite Michael to join us for a few minutes. We've talked about some associations that people can join, so I thought perhaps you might like to tell us a little bit about the IEEP, and then if you have any questions that you'd like to raise or discuss with John and Gareth, then this would be a great chance.
Right, thank you, Andy. Can you hear me?
We can perfectly.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth, and thank you, John. It's been fascinating listening to you, and I'm rather heartened by what you've been talking about. And I must admit that some of the concepts that you've been discussing have gone a little bit over my head. I must admit, but certainly the emphasis that you, John, brought around energy efficiency and squeezing out those gains was really heartening. And John, your emphasis on eco design and trying to factor in how we design products at an earlier stage is critical in order to help with that end of life process. By the way, I was very interested in what you said about PFAS as well. I might come back to you on listening in on about PFAS.
Please do.
Yeah, IEP. So we're an institute based in Brussels and in the UK. We've been around for about 40 years. We are a research think tank, so to speak, focusing on environment and sustainability issues. We cover a broad range of policy areas, but certainly some of us are particularly interested in these topics of energy efficiency, eco design, industrial pollution, circular economy, and stuff. So, it's been a delight listening to you, and from a very different perspective to the sorts of people that I regularly speak to. And I must totally agree with what you were saying, Andy, earlier about industry being the main drivers for change and getting us to that net zero, that long-term target. I couldn't agree more. It's really not going to be government. It's going to be, you know, the ABBs and others of this world that are going to really get us there. Government's obviously important for designing that framework, but it's really up to industry to tell government what they need to help us get there. And you know, with progressive minds informing government about that, then it's, you know, it's a very optimistic path that we're creating. So yeah.
Thank you, Michael. How do people join the IEEP should they wish to do so?
Well, we're an institute. We have several ways in which you can engage with us. So, for example, we hold lots of webinars and seminars. We have a newsletter. We have lots of public events, and I can share the details afterwards. But we regularly engage in different stakeholder events, and we organise them ourselves. So you'll probably see us about. Our Brussels-based team who engage in mainland Europe are a bigger outfit. Myself and my UK colleagues are a lot smaller these days, but we are regularly out and about at different events.
Thank you very much. Well, I think that's excellent. Hopefully, that's I've done a little bit of matchmaking there, and you'll all be able to talk to each other with some topics of mutual interest, which would be excellent.
I've already
I think we're pretty.
Just to say, Andy, I've already connected with John's Chief Technical Officer through LinkedIn. So thank you.
Modern technology. And I should have said right at the beginning that John actually is calling in from Nuremberg, where he's attending an exhibition. So modern technology is fantastic all the way around.
It's just about hanging in there at the moment.
Right. Well,
by a thread.
I'll take the pressure off your battery by drawing it to a close, and thanking you, all three of you, actually, for your contributions, which have been really good. There'll be an on-demand version, so anyone who wants to watch it back a second time or miss the live version can do that. And then we'll produce a set of podcasts as well. So thank you very much for everybody for attending, and in particular to our two panelists and our little interloper at the end, Michael, for your contributions, which are very much appreciated. So with that, I'll draw it to an end and look forward to seeing everybody next time for another Talking Industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks, John.